Commander Vex'thara had seen many things in her 4 cycles of service aboard the Galactic Defense Initiative's flagship, but nothing quite prepared her for the sight of a human crouched beside her damaged exosuit, muttering what she assumed were curse words in that bizarre Earth dialect they called English. "Well, this is just fantastic," Marcus Stone said, his voice dripping with what Vex'thara was beginning to recognize as human sarcasm. "Your power coupling is fried. Your life support is running on emergency reserves. And I'm pretty sure your targeting system is showing me recipe suggestions instead of tactical data." Vex'thara's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement if she weren't currently bleeding luminescent blue fluid from 3 different wounds. The human's fingers moved with surprising delicacy across her armor's damaged circuits, his brown eyes focused with an intensity that seemed almost predatory. "You know," Marcus continued, not looking up from his work, "most species would have the courtesy to pass out from blood loss by now. But no, you Kytherian warriors just sit there, stoic as a rock, making me feel like I'm performing surgery on a statue. Your bedside manner requires improvement, human," Vex'thara managed, her voice carrying the melodic tones that made her species' speech sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus snorted. "Lady, I'm a combat engineer, not a doctor. My bedside manner consists of making sure you don't explode when I hit the power button." The irony wasn't lost on Vex'thara. 3 days ago, she'd been briefing her squad on the peculiarities of human behavior, warning them about the species' unpredictable nature, their tendency toward violence, and their disturbing habit of forming emotional attachments to inanimate objects. Now here she was, trusting one of them to literally hold her life in his hands. "There," Marcus said, closing a panel with more force than necessary. "That should get your primary systems back online. Though I have to say, whoever designed this armor clearly never heard of user-friendly interfaces." Vex'thara's HUD flickered to life, displaying readings that were marginally less catastrophic than before. The Kytherian military-industrial complex prides itself on complexity. It separates the worthy from the weak. "Right," Marcus drawled. "Because nothing says worthy warrior like dying because you couldn't figure out how to turn on your own life support." The human's irreverence should have been offensive, but Vex'thara found herself appreciating his directness. Most aliens either feared her species or treated them with the kind of reverence that made genuine conversation impossible. Marcus Stone treated her like she was just another soldier with a broken piece of equipment. "How long have you been with the initiative?" she asked. Genuinely curious, Marcus's hands paused in their work. 6 months. Got recruited right out of the Mars Colonial Defense Corps. Apparently, humans have a reputation for being good at fixing things that shouldn't work and making things work that shouldn't be fixed. And what do you think of that reputation? I think it's probably accurate. We're a stubborn species. We tend to bang on things until they work or until they're too broken to bang on anymore." Vex'thara's secondary arms twitched, a sign of amusement among her people. It's a crude but effective philosophy. Hey, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. The human's casual attitude was almost disarming. Vex'thara had fought alongside dozens of species, but none of them possessed this particular combination of competence and irreverence. Most beings treated warfare as either a sacred duty or a necessary evil. Humans seemed to treat it as just another job that needed doing. "So," Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious, "you want to tell me how you ended up in this mess? Because from what I can tell, you took a direct hit from a hegemony plasma cannon, survived, and then somehow managed to walk 3 kilometers back to base with a suit that should have shut down completely." Vex'thara's silence stretched long enough that Marcus looked up from his work, his brown eyes meeting her silver ones. There was something in his expression that made her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with her injuries. "It's complicated," she said finally. "Lady, I just spent 2 hours rewiring your nervous system interface. I think I can handle complicated." The human's persistence was both annoying and oddly comforting. Vex'thara found herself wanting to talk, which was unusual. Kytherian warriors were trained from birth to process trauma internally, to find strength in solitude and wisdom in silence. "My squad," she began, then stopped. The words felt foreign in her mouth, Marcus's expression softened slightly. Kia? Killed in action, yes. All of them. 15 warriors. Dead because I made a tactical error. What kind of error? Vex'thara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of distress. I trusted intelligence reports that said the hegemony forces had retreated from Sector 7. I led my squad into what I thought was a routine cleanup operation. Instead, we walked into a trap. Marcus nodded, his expression grim. How many hostiles? 47 confirmed. Possibly more. The human whistled low. 15 against 47. Those are some pretty bad odds. The numbers were not the problem. We faced worse and emerged victorious. The problem was the terrain. They funneled us into a killing field, and I didn't see it until it was too late. Marcus returned to his work, but his movements were gentler now. You got 14 people out of there alive? No. I got myself out. The others, Vex'thara's voice trailed off. They stayed behind to cover your retreat. They stayed behind because I ordered them to, because I was their commander, and I made the decision to sacrifice them for the greater good. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Marcus's hand stilled completely, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. That's a hell of a thing to carry around. It is the burden of command. Every Catherian officer knows that some decisions require sacrificing the few for the many. Sure. But knowing something intellectually and living with it emotionally are two different things. Vex'thara's head turned sharply toward him. You speak as if you have experience with such decisions. Marcus's jaw tightened. I've made my share of calls I'd rather not remember. Tell me. Whoa, not much to tell. Different war, different planet, same basic story. Sometimes you have to choose who lives, who dies, and sometimes you guess wrong. The humans' admission hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them was quite ready to cross. Vex'thara studied his face, noting the way his eyes had gone distant, the slight tremor in his hands as he resumed his work. How do you bear it? She asked softly. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns of her armor's neural interface. You don't bear it. You just carry it. Every day you wake up and you carry it and you try to make sure it doesn't happen again. And if it does happen again, then you carry that too. The simplicity of his answer was both profound and terrifying. Vex'thara had been trained to seek complex solutions to difficult problems, to find meaning in sacrifice and purpose in suffering. The idea that some burdens were simply meant to be carried, without redemption or resolution, was foreign to her. Your people have an interesting philosophy, she said. We're a practical species. We don't always have the luxury of philosophical complexity. Marcus reached for a diagnostic tool, his movements precise and economical. As he worked, Vex'thara found herself studying his face, noting the concentration in his brown eyes, the way his jaw worked when he encountered a particularly stubborn connection. There's something else, she said suddenly. What? About my squad. About what happened. Marcus's hand stilled. I'm listening. They didn't just die covering my retreat. They died because I froze. When the ambush began, when I realized what was happening, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I just stood there. The admission came out in a rush, the words tumbling over each other in her haste to get them out before she lost her nerve. Marcus looked up at her, his expression unreadable. For how long? 7 seconds. Maybe 8. Long enough for the hegemony forces to establish superior firing positions, that long enough for my people to start dying. And then? Yes, then my training kicked in. I issued orders, coordinated defensive fire, organized the retreat, but it was too late. The damage was done. Marcus nodded slowly. Combat paralysis. It happens. It happens, not to Catherian warriors. We are bred for battle, trained from birth to respond to threats with swift, decisive action. We do not freeze. Yeah, well, your breeding program apparently missed the memo that everyone freezes sometimes. It's not a character flaw. It's biology. Vex'thara's mandibles clicked in agitation. You do not understand. In my culture, a warrior who hesitates is a warrior who dies, and more importantly, a warrior who allows others to die because of that hesitation is no warrior at all. That's a pretty harsh standard. It is a necessary standard. We are guardians of the galaxy's peace. We cannot afford weakness. Marcus set down his tools and looked at her directly. You want to know what I think? I am not certain I do. I think you're being too hard on yourself. 7 seconds isn't a lifetime. It's barely a heartbeat in combat terms. It was long enough. Maybe. But beating yourself up about it won't bring them back. And it sure as hell won't help you make better decisions in the future. The human's bluntness was jarring, but there was something oddly comforting about it. Most beings would have offered platitudes or philosophical comfort. Marcus Stone offered simple, brutal honesty. How do you know so much about combat trauma? Vex'thara asked. Because I've been there. Lost people under my command, made mistakes that cost lives, spent months afterward wondering if I could have done things differently. And what conclusion did you reach? That wondering is pointless. The dead are dead, and the living have to keep going. That's not callousness. That's survival. Vex'thara considered this, her silver eyes fixed on Marcus's face. Your species has a reputation for emotional volatility, yet you speak of death with remarkable detachment. We're not detached, we're compartmentalized. Big difference. We feel everything. We just don't let it stop us from functioning. And how do you achieve this compartmentalization? Marcus's hands resumed their work, but his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Practice. Lots and lots of practice. The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence as Marcus continued his repairs. Vex'thara found herself studying the human's features, noting the way his brown hair fell across his forehead, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the careful precision of his movements. Why did you volunteer for this assignment? She asked suddenly. Marcus looked up, surprised by the question. What do you mean? Maine, the Galactic Defense Initiative. Most humans who join do so for adventure, for the chance to explore the galaxy, to prove themselves among the stars. You do not seem like the type to be motivated by such things. You're right. I'm not. Then why? Why? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his attention focused on a particularly delicate circuit board. Because somebody has to do it. Because if good people don't stand up and fight, then bad people win by default. That is a remarkably idealistic answer from someone who claims to be practical. Yeah, well, even practical people can have principles. Vex'thara's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. Your species continues to surprise me. We're full of surprises. Most of them unpleasant. I am beginning to suspect that human self-deprecation is a form of psychological defense mechanism. You're probably right. We deflect serious conversations with humor because serious conversations are uncomfortable. And yet you seem perfectly willing to engage in serious conversation with me. Marcus's hand stilled, and when he looked up, his expression was oddly vulnerable. Maybe because you're not human. Maybe because you're not going to judge me by human standards, or maybe because you recognize a kindred spirit. The words hung between them like a challenge. Marcus's brown eyes met her silver ones, and for a moment, the species barrier seemed to dissolve entirely. Maybe, he said softly. Vex'thara felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with her suit's heating system. It was dangerous, this feeling. Catherian warriors were taught to maintain emotional distance from their allies, to avoid the kind of personal attachments that could compromise judgment in battle. But Marcus Stone wasn't just an ally. He was something else entirely. Something she didn't have a name for. There, Marcus said, closing the final panel with a satisfied click. That should do it. Your armor is back to full functionality. Your life support is stable, and your targeting system is no longer trying to recommend recipes for plasma-grilled vegetables. Vex'thara's HUD confirmed his assessment. Every system showed green. Every indicator read normal. It was masterful work, accomplished with tools and techniques that should have been incompatible with Catherian technology. How did you know how to repair systems you've never seen before? She asked. Marcus grinned, and the expression transformed his entire face. I told you. Humans are good at fixing things that shouldn't work. This level of intuitive understanding suggests more than simple mechanical aptitude. Maybe. Or maybe I just paid attention during the technical briefings. Vex'thara knew he was deflecting again, but she let it pass. There would be time for more questions later. For now, she was content to simply appreciate the warmth of his presence, the easy confidence of his manner, the way he treated her like a person rather than a specimen. "Thank you," she said, meaning it more than she'd meant anything in a long time. "Don't mention it. Just try not to walk into any more ambushes, okay? I'm not sure my ego can handle having to put you back together again. I will do my best to avoid such encounters." "Good. Because next time I'm charging you for parts and labor." Vex'thara's mandibles clicked in genuine amusement. "I believe I can afford your rates. We'll see about that." Kytherian currency is notoriously inflated. As they prepared to leave the repair bay, Vex'thara found herself reluctant to end their conversation. There was something about Marcus Stone that made her want to know more, to understand the contradictions that seemed to define him. "Marcus," she said as they reached the door. "Yeah? When you spoke of practice, of learning to compartmentalize trauma, were you referring to formal training or personal experience?" Marcus's expression grew distant. "Both. The military teaches you techniques for dealing with combat stress, but life teaches you how to actually use them. And what has life taught you? That some things can't be fixed, only survived. That guilt is a luxury you can't afford in a war zone. And that sometimes, the best thing you can do for the people you've lost is to keep the people you still have alive." The words hit Vex'thara like a physical blow. In 3 simple sentences, Marcus had articulated something she'd been struggling to understand for months. "That is profound," she said quietly. "That's survival. There's a difference." As they walked toward the exit, Vex'thara found herself thinking about the human's words, about the way he'd spoken of carrying burdens rather than bearing them. It was a subtle distinction, but an important one. Perhaps, she thought, there was more to learn from humanity than she'd initially assumed. Perhaps there was more to learn from Marcus Stone than she'd dared to hope. 3 weeks later, Vex'thara found herself in the most unlikely of places, sitting across from Marcus Stone in the station's observation lounge, watching the stars wheel slowly past the viewport while he attempted to teach her how to play poker. "The key," Marcus said, dealing another hand with practiced ease, "is not to think about what cards you have, but what cards your opponent thinks you have." "This seems unnecessarily complex for a game of chance," Vex'thara observed, arranging her cards with the same precision she used to organize tactical displays. "It's not a game of chance, it's a game of psychology. The cards are just props." Vex'thara's mandibles clicked skeptically. "Human entertainment often involves psychological manipulation." "Pretty much all of it." "Yeah, we're a species that enjoys trying to outsmart each other for fun. How very human of you." Marcus grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." Their friendship had developed organically over the past weeks, born from shared duty shifts and mutual respect. Vex'thara had requested Marcus as her primary technical support, officially because of his expertise with alien systems. Unofficially, because she found his company oddly comforting. "Your move," Marcus said, tapping the table. Vex'thara studied her cards, then looked at Marcus's face. His expression was carefully neutral, but she'd begun to notice the small tells that betrayed his thoughts, the slight tightening around his eyes when he was bluffing, the way his jaw relaxed when he had a good hand. "I fold," she said, setting down her cards. "Smart move. I had a full house, I know." Your left eyebrow twitched when you picked up your last card. Marcus's poker face cracked. "Seriously? Seriously. You humans are remarkably transparent when you believe you are being deceptive. Well, that's just great. There goes my retirement plan. You were planning to retire as a professional gambler? Lady, at this point I'm planning to retire as anything that doesn't involve getting shot at on a regular basis." Vex'thara's amusement faded. "You are considering leaving the initiative, not considering. Planning. My contract is up in 6 months, and I'm not renewing." The news hit her like a physical blow. Over the past weeks, Marcus had become more than just a colleague or even a friend. He'd become something she couldn't quite name, something that made the endless cycle of missions and briefings bearable. May I ask why? She said, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Marcus was quiet for a moment, shuffling the cards with absent precision. Because I'm tired, Vex. Tired of fixing things just so they can get broken again. Tired of watching good people die for causes they don't really understand. Tired of pretending that what we do out here makes a difference. It does make a difference. We've saved thousands of lives, protected dozens of colonies, maintained peace across 17 systems. Have we? Or have we just postponed the inevitable? The hegemony keeps pushing, we keep pushing back. And meanwhile, people keep dying. It's a cycle that never ends. Vex'thara set down her cards. You sound like you've lost faith in our mission. I've lost faith in the idea that military solutions can solve political problems. The hegemony isn't going to be defeated by superior firepower or better tactics. They're going to be defeated when their own people decide they've had enough of being ruled by fanatics. And until then, we keep the peace as best we can and try not to lose ourselves in the process. The bitterness in his voice was new, and it troubled her. The Marcus she'd come to know was pragmatic but not cynical, realistic but not defeated. This version of him seemed worn down by something deeper than simple battle fatigue. What happened? She asked softly. What do you mean? 3 weeks ago, you spoke of compartmentalization, of carrying burdens without being crushed by them. Tonight, you sound like someone who's forgotten how to do either. Marcus's hand stilled. Maybe I have. Tell me. Tell me. He was quiet for so long that Vex'thara began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Remember that mission to Kepler Station? The one where we evacuated the civilian population before the hegemony arrived? Of course. It was a complete success. We saved over 3,000 people. We saved 3,007 people. I know because I counted them. Every single one. Why? Because I wanted to make sure we didn't leave anyone behind. Because I wanted to be absolutely certain that this time, everyone who could be saved was saved. Understanding dawned on Vex'thara like a cold sunrise. But we didn't save everyone. No, we didn't. Marcus's voice was steady, but she could see the pain in his eyes, the way his shoulders had drawn inward as if he were trying to make himself smaller. Tell me about the ones we didn't save. A family. Mom, dad, 2 kids. They were in the lower residential section when the evacuation order came through. The father was a maintenance worker. He knew the station better than anyone. He thought he could get them to the evacuation point through the service tunnels. What happened? Oh, the tunnels collapsed. Structural damage from the initial bombardment. They were trapped for 6 hours while we searched for them. We could hear them on the comm system, calling for help, begging us not to leave them behind. Vex'thara felt something cold settle in her chest. But you had to leave. The hegemony fleet was 2 hours out. If we'd stayed any longer, we would have lost the transport ships and everyone on them. It was the right decision, tactically speaking, but I can still hear them. The kids especially, they were so scared, and they kept asking when we were coming to get them. And I kept telling them to hold on, that we were going to find a way, that everything was going to be okay. Marcus's voice finally cracked, and Vex'thara saw something she'd never expected to see, tears gathering in his brown eyes. I lied to them, he whispered. I looked into that comm screen and I lied to 2 little kids about whether they were going to live or die. And then I left them there to burn when the hegemony glassed the station. The silence that followed was deafening. Vex'thara sat frozen, watching as Marcus struggled to regain his composure, as he tried to rebuild the walls that had kept his pain contained. You made the right decision, she said finally. I know. That's what makes it so much worse. How so? Because if I'd made the wrong decision, if I'd stayed and gotten everyone killed, at least I could hate myself for being stupid. But I made the right decision. The smart decision. The decision that saved the most lives. And I still have to live with the fact that I condemned 4 people to death to do it. Vex'thara understood now. The weight Marcus carried wasn't just guilt over the dead. It was the terrible knowledge that he'd do the same thing again if faced with the same choice, that he'd sacrifice the few for the many, over and over, because it was the right thing to do. You're not planning to retire, she said suddenly. You're planning to run. Marcus's eyes snapped to hers. What? You're not tired of the mission. You're tired of being the kind of person the mission requires you to be. You're tired of making decisions that cost lives, even when they're the right decisions. That's not. It is. You're afraid that if you stay, you'll become someone you don't recognize, someone who can make those choices without feeling the weight of them. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. You know, for an alien, you're awfully good at reading humans. Perhaps because I recognize the struggle. We are more alike than either of us wants to admit. How do you mean? Vex'thara took a deep breath. Because I've been having the same thoughts about leaving, about running, about finding some place where the decisions are simpler and the stakes are lower. Really. Every day I wake up and I remember my squad, and I wonder how many more people I'll have to watch die before this war ends. And every day I ask myself if I'm strong enough to keep going. And what answer do you give yourself? That strength has nothing to do with it. That we keep going because stopping would dishonor the people we've lost, and because the alternative is to let the universe become a little bit darker. Marcus was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on the stars outside the viewport. That's a hell of a way to live. It's the only way I know how to live. Yeah, me too. They sat in comfortable silence, two warriors sharing the weight of choices that had shaped them, of losses that had defined them. Vex'thara found herself studying Marcus's profile, noting the way the starlight caught the small scar above his eyebrow, the way his jaw worked as he processed his thoughts. Marcus, she said softly. Yeah? When you spoke of the family on Kepler Station, when you remembered their voices. What about it? But you were crying. Marcus's head turned toward her, his expression puzzled. No, I wasn't. You were. Silently, but you were crying. I don't cry, Vex. It's not something I do. Vex'thara reached across the table and gently touched his cheek. Her fingers came away wet with tears he didn't even know he'd shed. You do cry, she said softly. You just don't let yourself feel it. Marcus stared at her damp fingers, his expression shifting from confusion to something like wonder. I didn't even realize. Crow, humans compartmentalize pain so effectively that sometimes you forget it exists. But it's still there, still affecting you, still demanding to be felt. How do you know all this? Because I've been watching you, Marcus Stone. For 3 weeks, I've been watching you carry burdens that would crush most beings, and I've been wondering how you do it. And what conclusion have you reached? That you don't do it. You survive it. There's a difference. Marcus laughed. But there was no humor in it. You're starting to sound like me. Perhaps we've been influencing each other. Perhaps we have. Ache. Vex'thara realized she was still touching his face, still close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. She should pull away, should restore the professional distance that military protocol demanded. Instead, she found herself leaning closer. Marcus, she whispered. Yeah, I don't want you to leave. Vex, I know it's selfish. I know you need to do what's right for you, but I don't want you to leave. Marcus's hand came up to cover hers, his fingers warm against her skin. Why? Because you see me. Not as a Catherian warrior, not as an alien curiosity, but as a person, because you understand the weight I carry without needing me to explain it, because you make me feel less alone in the universe. You're not alone. Vex. You never have been. I was. Until I met you. The words hung between them like a bridge, fragile and precious and dangerous. Marcus's thumb traced across her knuckles, his touch gentle despite the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. I can't promise I won't leave, he said finally. I know, but I can promise that whatever I decide, it won't be because I'm running from something. It'll be because I'm running towards something. And what might that be? Marcus's smile was soft and genuine. I'm not sure yet. But I think it might involve a certain Catherian commander who's too stubborn to know when she's beaten. I am not beaten. No, you're not. That's what makes you so damn inspiring. Vex'thara felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something that had nothing to do with her armor's heating systems and everything to do with the human sitting across from her. It was dangerous, this feeling. It compromised judgment, clouded priorities, made her want things she had no right to want. But for the first time in months, she found herself not caring about the danger. "Marcus," she said. "Yeah, thank you. For what? For fixing my armor. For seeing through my walls. For teaching me that some burdens are meant to be shared." Marcus's smile widened. "Don't mention it. Just try not to walk into any more ambushes, okay? I'm getting tired of putting you back together. I make no promises. I wouldn't expect you to." As they prepared to leave the observation lounge, Vex'thara found herself thinking about the future, about the choices that lay ahead, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face them alone. Perhaps there was more to learn from humanity than she'd initially assumed. Perhaps there was more to learn from Marcus Stone than she'd ever dared to hope, and perhaps, in a universe full of darkness and difficult choices, that was enough.